Hello, I'm David Mason. I'm the Director of Public Health for the town of Sandwich, and this is a second in a series of public service announcement from the town of Sandwich with regards to the coronavirus to provide you information. Today, we're going to have a little different format. Today we have with us David Sampson, the Chair of the Town of Sandwich Selectmen, Pam Gould, who is the Sandwich Superintendent of Schools, and Chief J.J. Burke, the Fire Chief for the Town of Sandwich. And I'm going to pass this over to Dave to initiate our discussion to get you some information that we've been hearing what information people are looking for, and this will provide that.
Thanks, Dave. So, hello, everybody. It is 12 p.m. on Thursday, March 19th. Just as a point of reference for you, we are going to run through some questions. We're going to try to keep this brief to give you some good information and not take up too much of your time. So, to get started, who is on the COVID-19 command team, and how does the grouping compare to storm events that we're more familiar with that happen in the town?
Okay, so the command team's made up of representatives from the police, fire, health department, school, emergency management, and town hall. In terms of how does it compare with other storm events, adding public health and nursing to our command team because it is a health emergency. Usually the core group is maintained for all events, and again, we added in the public health and health departments for this particular event.
And can you give a little bit more information about when we started getting ready for this? My perspective is that we were ahead of the curve based on conversations I've had with my colleagues.
Yeah, so towards the end of February, it was on the radar, and we convened our first command team meeting on March 2nd, which is a Monday. We run weekly operational periods since then. We're on our third right now. So we were a couple weeks ahead of the curve. We had it on the radar, and now we're settling into our weekly rotation.
Could we just expand upon that as far as for how long we've been preparing?
Yeah, so to add to that, probably 12, 13 years. So in residents that were around a dozen years ago, we did a drive-through pandemic at Corpus Christi back in 2009, and we did a second one 2 years later. So it's been close to a dozen years where we've had this on the radar. We physically practiced it. It's being replicated at Cape Cod Community College. All the people that developed the one at Four Seas were at our event a dozen years ago, so it made for a seamless transition to establish that pretty quickly.
Great, and I think it's important for the public to know that the command team is truly operating 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Very, very dedicated group of individuals. I've had the opportunity to sit on a couple meetings, weekends. It's really a continuous effort. And I think that leads us very nicely into the next question about, how does the town get notified when there's a COVID-19 positive? What's the expectations from the community? How does that work?
Well, is when an individual is tested positive for the coronavirus, the Mass Department of Public Health reaches out through two means. One, through a telephone call, and two, through a program that we observe, MAVEN, which is put out by the Department of Public Health, so we get notified electronically and verbally. Joanne Gake, our public health nurse, is the recipient of that information when that is received. So in that process, when Joanne is notified of it, that initiates contacting the case or a relative of the case so that we can get information. She also reaches out to the team, so we are made aware of the situation at the same time.
Okay, and then just to help people understand what confidentiality restrictions are in place regarding these cases, and how do we go about determining what activities those individuals have been engaged with and who might be impacted?
So when Joanne receives that information, the first steps that she's taken is to identify contact or contact situations. And that is based on the memory of the individual who is tested positive, which can be strained at times. Keep in mind when they receive that notification, or family members receive that notification of an individual being testing positive for coronavirus, that, you know, their memory becomes a little vague and information will dribble in. So we do the best we can, you know, sit down with a calendar, you know, and we walk through the calendar going back 14 days, you know, to identify potentially where the positive case may have contracted the virus, and two, to identify contacts along the way. So when we receive that contact information, we are then required by law to reach out to those identified contacts. So, and we've said this in the past, as far as, and with the current cases, we have reached out to all identified contacts at this point. Sometimes that involves another town, or another town. We end up, if there's contacts in another town, we then contact the health department in that town, notify them that we have a positive case, that there were contacts in their community, and then they initiate the follow-up on that end, in which we, you know, inform people that, one, you were a contact of a known case, two, here are the symptoms, you need to be aware of it, and then we emphasize the importance of social distancing at that time. But keep in mind also, as far as, you know, what's in place here is HIPAA laws. We do not, and we will not and cannot identify the person, their address, any personal information about them. So we cannot share that. But we have, to your question, Dave, as far as, you know, as far as notifying where everybody's been, you know, we're looking at direct contacts. And if you've been notified, as a direct contact, you will know it. So, and if you have not heard, you are not a direct contact.
Right, I think that's the most concise way to say it, and you have to trust the process a little bit, but Dave's department, the public health nurse, worked very, very hard to make sure that we're tracking down these individuals and notifying the right people.
Sorry, Dave, and just to add to that, you know, this is a process that's ongoing regularly, even before this virus. I mean, we follow up on communicable diseases as is mandated by state law. So on a daily basis throughout the year, we're following up on communicable diseases and following the same protocol. It's a required protocol. So you could have someone in the community with a communicable disease at any time of the year, and we're identifying the contacts and reaching out to those contacts. So there is no change in protocol. It's how this is addressed.
That's very good to know. So what are we doing to help seniors and other folks in the community who are in need?
Yeah, so Susan Morancic from Council on Aging is attending our meetings, and we currently have lists already of those that are power dependent, and this goes back to the other question about storms. So we follow the same, basically skate the same lane as that. We have the ability, and her staff has the ability to check up on those folks, see how they're doing. And again, that's important to let them know there's somebody out there that is checking on them. And so we reference that first, and then Susan has her own internal process with her staff in terms of answering questions and following up with people's concerns as they call into the Council on Aging.
Okay, and I think the other thing, you know, I encourage people to do, and something that I've done, is just reach out to the elderly folks you know in the community, reach out to the people that are in the high-risk groups, see if they need something at the store, see if they're doing okay, because a lot of people are just generally concerned about the current environment, and watching the news nonstop generally doesn't help that situation. Dr. Gould, what about schools and school lunch programs? I know we've made a lot of movement there.
We have, thankfully. I first want to give a huge shout out to Marshland Restaurant, who stepped up until there's a federal mandate about the number of students that we have on free and reduced lunch, whether we can qualify for the federal reimbursement. That's at a 50%. And, you know, on the bright side, Sandwich doesn't qualify for that on a day-to-day basis. We have been working with the state, and our food service group, Abbey Group, has been in constant contact with them. We are finally, and I've tweeted out today and put it out on Facebook, that we are finally good to go. Beginning Monday, we will have breakfast and lunch available from 11 to 1 at Sandwich High School. They can pull up just to the right of the building. They'll see a big tent, and they'll get, on that particular day from 11 to 1, they'll get that day's lunch and the next morning's breakfast. All students, no questions asked, no ID. Any student on the Cape is allowed to do this, and that'll help us that. We also do a program working through Cape Kids Meals, where we have identified our most food insecure students in the town, and they all school year long anyway provide services and meals to the students on the weekends. We are taking that, they've packed for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then we're doing a food drive today up at the high school, and I think we're going to continue that each Thursday to allow us to continue to kind of add to the food and the breakfast and lunch any other, because we also know that there are parents that might be not working. In what other ways can this community help even the parents of the family that might not be working and they're now also food insecure? And this is, the longer this goes, that will be helpful to them.
Yeah, certainly a tremendous effort in putting the right resources available to those that need them. I know it's taken a lot of work on your part, and a lot of folks have come together from a lot of different
Lot of people.
organizations
A lot of people.
throughout all the districts throughout the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. And it's all for the kids and the families, so that's the most important thing to us.
Chief Burke, can you talk a little bit about how our new public safety infrastructure and facilities have helped with this effort?
Yes, we're very lucky. If you go back even a couple years ago, operating out of the basement of the Human Services Building, we were functional, but this gives us not only the space, but the technology to operate. So the center is up and running right now. The Emergency Operations Center is staffed with our emergency management personnel and one of our fire department personnel. We have the capability to not only track the news, but we have the call screen up on one of the big screens, so every call service that comes in, we're able to look at it and track it and look at the location. We have redundancy with the generator that is there in both buildings. We have the multiple internet capabilities, both hardline and two separate wireless networks, one private and one public. It gives us an excellent footprint that if we had to consolidate operations, which potentially if we closed all town buildings and everybody wanted to work out of one place, meaning department heads and members of the command team, we have that functionality there to be able to work 24/7. It's controlled, it's centrally located, and it's been extremely beneficial for this particular event that the station was ready and we could operate there.
Great. And what about just the general state of town operations? So we've closed all town offices to the public. We've really sent most of our staff to work remotely who can, starting today. So what should residents expect from that perspective?
So on the fire side, we have online permitting anyways. So emails and phone calls obviously will be returned. Email is the best way if you have a question or a concern. fd@sandwichmass.org. You can go to the fire department website, the town's website, but that's your best bet because it does ping my phone. So if I happen to not be in the station, I can at least see the email and provide a response. We've reduced our inspectional capability at the moment. It's temporary, but we are not conducting what we call 26F real estate inspections. We've consolidated everything down to utilize staff for the most important issues. And I don't have an answer of when that's going to restart, but we're definitely taking a 7-day moratorium on that piece.
Okay. And the majority of town offices are currently closed. You can call, you can email. The dump transfer station is open. Golf course is available with by appointment in advance, from what I understand. So those services are still there. So I do want to try to wrap this up. If someone is not feeling well and thinks that they need testing, what is the best course of action on their part?
So the best course of action, if someone's not feeling well, is first thing to do is call your doctor, to call your primary care physician. And what I'm going to do is just read off of the most recent information put out by Cape Cod Healthcare as far as how it should be handled. Step 1 is call your doctor. Your doctor will screen you over the phone and determine if you should be tested. If your doctor determines that you should be tested, he or she will fax your information and prescription for testing to Cape Cod Healthcare at that time. Cape Cod Healthcare will then call you and set up an appointment for the test site. Now, the test site is at Cape Cod Community College, but you need an appointment. You cannot just drive in. If you drive in, they will peel you off and tell you to call a doctor and get a prescription at that point. So remember, you must have an appointment to get tested, or you'll be turned away. And if you are experiencing serious symptoms and do not have a primary care provider, please visit the triage tents located outside the Cape Cod Hospital and Falmouth Hospital for screening.
Okay. And what about 911? If somebody calls 911, I think we've changed our protocols there a little bit to protect our first responders.
Yes, so when you call 911, you're going to get a couple extra questions, and it's regardless of what the incident is. So they're going to ask about flu-like symptoms, fever, and that's just to give our personnel a heads up. We have personal protective equipment, and we want to make sure our folks utilize it. So answering those questions gives us a heads up. We also put a 5th ambulance in service. It's a skeleton ambulance, but we have that available also just to uptick our resources. We have that 5th ambulance. We're not relying on any other community. We can take care of ourselves.
Okay, so I think biggest messages certainly are maintain social distancing, don't go places you don't need to be, do required tasks. The town has been providing a lot of communication, official communication from the town comes here on Sandwich Community Television. We're sending out Facebook notifications, email notifications. If you're not signed up on the town website to get those communications, you can get them real time, and they'll even text your phone as well. So highly recommend you go to sandwichmass.org and sign up for those notifications. Many of our small businesses in town are closed. Some of our restaurants are still open for takeout, so try to support those businesses however you can. Any other comments from the team?
I was just going to add one thing on the 911. Part of our protocol is they're going to question you from the door. If you're ambulatory, if you're able to be up and around, the crew leader is going to question you from the front yard, at least to get some answers to those questions. And then only one member may enter the house initially. But if you need to be transported, we're going to transport you. But I don't want people to be surprised if there's only one member and there's an initial discussion, if possible, from the door.
So they're going to stand back from the doorway
They're going to
until
maintain
they...
that 6 feet initially. They may be masked up, they may have the gown on, but they're just going to verify some questions. So I don't want people to be concerned if the ambulance crew is 6 feet from their front door, if you're ambulatory, to have an initial discussion, and then they'll do the appropriate care as needed.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for people to know there's a lot of folks out here that are working really hard and available to be resources. Just from my perspective, the Board of Selectmen and the people in the town of Sandwich, I want to express my thanks for the efforts of the command team. I know you guys are working very hard, so it's much appreciated.
Just one other couple things to add. Out from the World Health Organization, if you're experiencing symptoms as this goes on, one warning from the World Health Organization is with regards to ibuprofen, that it may create a greater problem or a response with the virus and not help you. I would suggest you call your primary care physician with regards to that, but that was just information released by the World Health Organization. I know there's been some calls regarding the beaches. Our beaches are still open. We're not closed. We're not Florida in the temperatures, with the warmer temperatures. So at this time, there's no need for us to address that. But do keep in mind as far as why controls are put in place. I mean, if people can't be responsible, if they can't adhere to the controls, this is why controls are put in place, at this point. So that's...
And I'll ask one final question. I think one of the important pieces here is how contagious this is. And that's really what the risk is in interacting with others. And I don't know that everybody has, fully understands that, but that's really where the risk is. This is very contagious, and whether or not you contract it, you could be a carrier and spreading it around. Right. And that's where the real risk is for everyone. Because
the flu, if you have the flu, what I've seen put out so far is you can spread it to 1.5 people. With this virus, you can spread it to almost 3. So it is very contagious. It moves very quickly. The word is, don't be a vector. Vector is a negative word. It sounds negative. Don't be a vector and transfer the disease.
Okay. Anybody have any additional comments?
Just a quick thing, we'll be doing these videos regularly. We'll probably be doing one next week. We're going to bring in someone from the schools, from the social workers end, as far as dealing with some situations for some advice with kids and parents, and we'll be doing that next week.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time. If you need somebody to call the COA, I think is the best number to call, and we'll provide additional information as it becomes available. Thank you.